How do you love? How do you love? How do you love? How do you love? The same question asked four different ways can give you, well, lots of different answers. And today is a Sunday devoted in Advent to the idea of love. And the notion of love is something different for every one of us here, right? When people ask that question, how do you love? I mean, if we've got 50 people in this room, you're going to have 50 different answers. Back in, I don't know, the late 1980s, I guess, there was time, the sun still rose and set before 2000. We had a book called The Five Love Languages, and it was supposedly a book that educated those of us who were not well versed in the multitude of expressions of love, in the idea that there were basically five ways you could show or experience love. You could speak words of affirmation, right? You can do acts of service. You can receive gifts well. You can spend quality time with people. And there's always my personal favorite, physical touch. I'm a hugger, right? In fact, I'm somewhere a combination of physical touch and words of affirmation. In other words, I like being told how great I am while you're hugging me. Okay, something I have to remind my wife of occasionally. And so I am not in my nature very well tuned to the other modes of loving. I'm just not. Okay? How I love comes easily to me. Other expressions of love do not. My wife is an act of service girl. And she, over the 36 years we've been married, has learned how to, I guess you would say, persuade me to take part in her acts of service. Okay? Usually it looks like an ambush, or at least it feels like that way. When we started going to Hungary as summer missionaries, our initial experiences there were against my wishes. I had 2 weeks of vacation, and now you're dragging me literally halfway across the world, and I'm tired enough as it is. Of course, it was the most extraordinary experience I had, and I did it. I don't know. I guess we ended up going 7 times, so it couldn't have been that bad, right? But it all started as an act of service. Well, so this week, Wednesday, I get word that my daughter, who is pregnant with our third grandson, has to go to see her OBGYN because she is running a fever. Now, you say, well, that's bad. Yeah, well, her entire household was running a fever. Her husband, who is never sick or misses work or anything, was flat on his back on the couch for pretty much the entire week. The boys, Walker, my 3-year-old grandson, and Leo, my 1-year-old, were running fevers and were not really pleasant people. And my daughter, of course, ended up getting it from somebody. And so she had to go see her doctor because as she walked in, they took her temperature. Her temperature was 104. And yeah, that's exactly what I said. Woo! Well, so the doctor said, well, we're not going to send you home right now. We're going to take care of you right here. And, there's fluids and Tylenol and all the stuff you can do for pregnant girls. And so they were in the middle of doing that. Well, my wife, active service, had volunteered to go down and watch the boys because we couldn't leave the boys with their dad because he was sick. Now, Dwayne, in my very clear, always correct memory, I don't remember anybody saying, oh, here, I'll take the kids. Don't bother Dwayne when I was sick. Now, I'm sure they did. But, so Ann is down at the hospital with the boys playing out in the waiting area, which is always fun. She calls me, or I texted her and I said, hey, how's our girl doing? Just as proof that I do have some small, tender part in my Grinch heart. And she calls me and says, well, the doctor had her come down to basically the emergency room, and they're giving her bags of fluids and the world's largest Tylenol, and I'm watching the boys. And the reason I knew she was watching the boys is because in between about every word of her speech to me was, hey, get down off that. Hey, stop climbing on that. No, don't knock on that window. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. All of the code words for I'm watching a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And she said, well, Dwayne, she said, I don't think we should send the boys home with Hannah. I think, Hannah's going to be okay to go home, but I think she and Reno need a day just to be sick and start feeling better. Okay, now, you are all active service people. You all have hearts of gold. My thought was, that means a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old are going to be descending in my nest of peace. And I am going to have to accept some level of responsibility. I retired to get away from accepting levels of responsibility. Okay? I've spent the last 4 decades responsible. But, as I mentioned before, my sweet wife is particularly skilled at placing me in a position where I can do nothing except say, okay, dear. And so we worked out the details, and I ended up driving down to Winchester to their house. She drove them to the house, got a bag of clothes together and diapers and bottles and cups and toys and handed them all to me and said, get them home. I'm going back to the hospital to make sure Hannah can get discharged and was taken care of. Okay. Now, things are okay so far because when you come to Papa's house, 2 things are going to happen. 3 things. 1, there's macaroni and cheese to be made. 2, everybody can have chocolate milk. 3, we can watch all the tractor videos on YouTube you want to watch. Okay, and I don't mean hand him a phone and he's off by himself. I mean we sit together, the two boys and Papaw, and we're just glued to the television screen. Watch, ooh, that's a big excavator. Man, isn't that a big excavator? What color is it? Yellow, yeah. I mean hours we do that. Okay. Now, what my wife failed to make clear was that the boys were not fully healed of their own illness. So they're both feeling a little warm to the touch. Okay? And so she finally gets home, and we've had macaroni and cheese and watched videos, and we're going to take a bath. And so she handles the bath because I'm not about screaming and getting wet. Okay, those two things together just don't do me very well. And so, my acts of service end at the bathroom door, pretty much. And so we come out, and we have the good tasting kids medicine, right? And so they get all dosed up for bedtime, and we go to bed. And I take Walker, the 3-year-old, and we go to the king size bed because I know I'm going to wake up with a foot in the side of my head at least twice at night. But that's okay. All right? And Anne takes Leo over to the visitor's bedroom. So I get the foot in the side of the head. She has to deal with 10 minutes of crying because Leo never wants to go to sleep. All right? He's my kid. He's like Papa. All right? You can sleep when you're dead. All right? There's things to be done, places to go, people to see, things to do all the time. All right? But I heard the crying subside, and after a tickle and wrestling session, Walker was finally worn out, so we all got to sleep. And you say, well, this is a very pleasant story, and we, how loving Dwayne is. Until about 3 o'clock in the morning. And for those of you who are not yet parents, here's something that you need to be aware of. Medicine wears off. And it wears off at the most inconvenient times. And so you're sound asleep, everybody's happy and at peace. And all of a sudden, I hear my grandson start to, and I feel the rain of 3-year-old spittle filled with germs cover me. And I know that the flu is in my future as well. All right? I've resigned myself to the fact that I'm probably, without a doubt, Christmas Eve will be the peak of my, illness. And that got me to thinking about this week's sermon. Sometimes love looks like spittle on your forehead at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes love sounds like saying, yes, dear, when you don't want to. Sometimes love means setting your entire life aside so you can take care of other people when they need you. Okay? We have a particular picture of love that is not always the most accurate. Love always requires surrender. It always requires giving up of yourself. And this week, we're going to look in the Gospel of John. John is his gospel is a unique and particular one in many ways. one of those ways is he spends almost 1/4 of his writing on something we call the upper room discourse. It's where Jesus is teaching the disciples in the upper room in the hours before he is betrayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Chapter 13 through 17 are all in this room. Okay, out of 21 chapters. And one of the things that he teaches us about is what love looks like according to God. Okay? Please keep in mind, and this is something that I have to remind myself of every day when I sit down and read the Bible, or get to my prayers, or read a devotional. I have to remind myself that it doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what you think. The truth that we're presented with in the Bible is the truth, regardless of how we feel about it or whether we think it might be better if blank. In the 15th chapter of John, starting with verse 12, Jesus says to his disciples, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I love you. Greater love than this has no one, that anyone should lay down his soul for his friends." Now, I'm reading from a different translation. Soul. Not just your life. You have to lay down your soul. "You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. I no longer call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his Lord does. But I call you friends, because all things which I heard from my Father I have made known to you. You have not chosen me, but I chose you out and planted you, that you should go and should bear fruit, and your fruit will remain, that whatever you should ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, that you love one another." Keep in mind, just before this part of the discourse, Jesus has already said to his disciples, and he says it repeatedly in different ways. In John 14, he said, "If you love me, keep my commandments." So he draws a very clear distinction around what love is. Love of God is obedience. Period. If you love me, keep my commandments. Now, of course, 2,000 years ago and today, we sometimes tend to get a little worked up over the keeping of those commandments. Right? You've got 10 commandments, and in the Jewish belief, there are 613 laws, commandments in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. 613 that stem out of the 10 commandments. And you're responsible to keep them all. Okay, well, praise God, we aren't responsible for keeping them all. Jesus came because God knew we couldn't keep them all. That's why he came. That's why we celebrate Christmas. He is our hope. He's our relief. He equates obedience with our love for God. This brings to mind another section of Scripture in Matthew 22, and this is a quote from all four Gospels. All four Gospels touch on this. At one point, a scribe comes up to Jesus trying to catch him, right? And he says, hey, what's the most important commandment? And you'll remember that Jesus said, and it says, and Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second, okay, the scribe wasn't expecting this. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments, all the law and the prophets hang. Love is the foundation for everything that Jesus brings to us in this season. Hope, peace, joy, all are supported, undergirded by love. How are we to obey then? If obedience is love, okay, if that first commandment, the most important one, love the Lord your God, how are we supposed to obey? Okay, well, we obey by giving our life to Jesus, by giving our life to others, by lying in my king-size bed and letting my 3-year-old grandson cough all over me. Now, Jesus says, no greater love than this, that a man should lay down his life for his friends. Well, this conjures up a couple of images, right? It conjures up him on the cross in less than 24 hours. Okay? He's laying down his life for you, for his friend. It conjures up images of a battlefield, right? The hand grenade comes rolling in front of a group of soldiers, and one soldier throws himself on it and takes the full brunt of the blast to save the others. Okay? No greater love is there than giving your life or your soul for your friends. But that doesn't mean that you're off the hook if you don't hang on a cross or you don't have an opportunity to throw yourself on a hand grenade. Right? Isn't that the way it reads? You know, there's no greater love, and we're supposed to aspire to this great love. So does that mean we're supposed to look for ways to die for other people? Well, no. And yes. Every day when you wake up, you have an opportunity to put yourself aside for others. Every day that I wake up, I have to put myself aside for my wife, for my children. All the plans that I had for my retirement did not include caring for my mother, being with my father when he died. I was supposed to be traveling. I've worked hard for 40 years. You all have similar things in your life. Expectations, desires, hopes. God says that love is setting those aside for what he tells you to do. If you love me, do what I ask you to do. That's what Jesus said. So, what if Jesus meant this something more about love? Not just hanging on a tree, not just jumping on a hand grenade, but it's an everyday thing. Dying is an everyday thing. What if he's telling us to live our lives in such obedience to him that every day we pour ourselves out for one another? What does that look like? Well, it means setting aside our comfort for others. It means setting aside our wealth for others. It means setting aside our time for others. Putting aside every self-centered ambition and thought so that we can lift other people up. That is love. Okay? It's not the warm, gushy thing that you see on the Hallmark Channel all Advent. It's not the little flutter in your heart you feel when your beloved walks in the room. And by the way, I'm not downplaying that. God saw to it that there was a whole book of the Bible devoted to that kind of love. So it's a thing. The love Jesus is talking about in the moment that he's facing betrayal and the cross is a love that demands we put ourselves aside. Because if we do, we are friends of God. We're friends of God. I always want, in James, there is this passage where they're talking about Abraham. The author is talking about Abraham and how Abraham, his righteousness was attributed to him, and he was a friend of God. What did that look like? I mean, that doesn't tell me what I can't create a picture. Righteousness. Does that, I mean, he was just so good? Well, no, we were all born in sin. He was a sinner. He was a liar. So, what does that look like? This is what it looks like. Setting yourself aside for others and for God. Making him the first priority and making other people the second priority. You come somewhere down the line. Love others as you love yourself. Gee, I'm hungry. I'm going to go make myself a sandwich. My wife is sitting right next to me. Hey, honey, what can I get you? That's an act of love. Boy, I sure am tired. I think I'm going to bed. Tell you what, how about if I put the kids to bed tonight? Act of love. So we become God's friends. What's the proof of this friendship? Well, we're no longer slaves. We no longer live in fear of our master, but we long for his company. And he tells us everything he hears from his Father. He shares his most incredible wealth with us if we obey him and become his friends. Be a friend of God. In the goodness of God, he chose us. He didn't wait for us to choose him. In his choosing, he plucked us out of the world, out of our sin. And he planted us right here. He planted you so that you could bear fruit and glorify God the Father. St. Paul reminds us about love and what love looks like and acts like. And you really can't talk about love. You can't preach a sermon on love without this in the back of your mind. If I speak with tongues of men and of angels, but I do not have love, I have become as sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophecies and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give out all of my goods, and if I deliver my body that I may be burned, but I do not have love, I have not profited anything. Love has patience. It is kind. Love is not envious. Love is not vain. It is not puffed up. It does not behave indecently. It does not pursue its own things. It is not easily provoked. It thinks no evil. It doesn't rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. Love quietly covers all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, but if there are prophecies, they will be caused to cease. If tongues, they will cease. If knowledge, it will be caused to cease. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect thing comes, then that which is in part will be caused to cease. It will end. When I was an infant, I spoke as an infant. I thought as an infant. I reasoned as an infant. But when I became a man, I caused to cease the things of the infant. For now we see through a mirror in dimness, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will fully know, even as I was fully known. And now faith, hope, and love, these three things remain. But the greatest of these is love. Love. Love is the foundation for all that we do. It is obedience to God. It is our time and our treasure and ourselves poured out for others. We live in love because we have hope. Not only in the incarnation of Jesus, but in his return, which will be soon. He gives us peace while we wait. He leaves his joy with us. And one day, friends, it will be Christmas every day. We will dwell with Jesus the King in his royal city forever. Amen.